Hello, welcome back. I am so happy to see you decided to continue with the Headspace Guide to Meditation and Mindfulness. I am Turuko. Let's continue with where we left. If you like listening my audiobooks, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video so that I can continue making these videos. Thank you. Hostage to technology. As if we didn't already have enough ways of avoiding what's going on in our minds, we now have emails and social media routed to our phones so we can be truly distracted all day. As convenient as that may be, it means that now even the slightest feeling of boredom or restlessness is a trigger to get online and keep busy. Take a moment to think about it. What's the first thing you do each day? Is it checking your emails, perhaps sending messages on Facebook, interacting with friends or work colleagues through Twitter? And what's the last thing you do at night before going to sleep? If the research is accurate, then there's a pretty good chance that you'll be doing at least one of these things at either end of the day, if not all of them. It's pretty hard to switch off when you're permanently plugged in. I read a story in the newspaper about a man who'd become so addicted to technology, so terrified that he might miss something important, or perhaps offend someone by not replying to them, that he'd taken to sleeping with his smartphone on his chest. Not only that, but he also took his laptop to bed with him and slept with it by his side, actually in the bed. This is a married man, at least at the time of writing, who shares the bed with his wife. The irony is that he had such a flood of electronic data flowing into his life that despite taking his computer to bed, he still managed to somehow miss an email in which he was offered $1.3 million for his company that he'd put up for sale. This may be an extreme example, but pretty much everyone I know complains of feeling overwhelmed by the amount of electronic data in their life. When I was living as a monk, I used to think, well, just turn it off, don't use it. But living out in the world and having now to embrace all these things in my own work, I can see that it's not as simple as just turning it off or ignoring it. So instead of trying to stop or change it, we need to look at how we can relate to it skillfully and not feel overwhelmed. Fundamental principles of training the mind. That idea brings us back to the fundamental principles of training the mind. Mindfulness doesn't require you to change anything. In becoming increasingly aware of your own mind, you may find you choose to make some changes in your external life, but that's entirely up to you. There's no need to give everything up or radically change your lifestyle in any way. Dramatic changes like this are rarely sustainable, which is what makes a mindful way of living so achievable. You can keep living as you always have done, if that's what you want to do. Mindfulness is about learning how to change your experience of that lifestyle. It's about finding a way to live as you are, but with an underlying sense of fulfillment. And then, if you feel as though you want to make some changes, then of course feel free. The difference is, any changes you make will be sustainable. Stress. The consequence of living such a busy life, with so many responsibilities and choices, is that our bodies and minds are constantly working overtime. Many people I know say that even when they're asleep at night, it feels as though the cogs just keep on turning. So it's no coincidence that the rate of stress-related illness has increased at the same time as our lives have become more complicated. For example, the World Health Organization now confirms that depression, a potential downstream complication of stress, is the leading cause of disability worldwide, and is a major contributor to the overall global burden of disease. People came to the clinic where I worked for all kinds of different reasons, but the symptoms of stress were by far the most common. Sometimes people came along without prompting. At other times, they may have gotten a nudge from their partner, family member, or friend. Occasionally, the symptoms were so bad that their doctor referred them. But mostly, these were ordinary people looking to find a way to cope a bit better in life. Perhaps they felt under pressure at work, overwhelmed by family life, tired of obsessive thinking, or consistently acting in a way that was causing themselves or others harm. Most of them were simply looking for a little more headspace in their lives. In fact, At the end of the book, you'll find case studies for some of these individuals who've generously agreed to share their experiences. Stress can make us do all kinds of funny things. It can lead to us saying things we wish we hadn't, doing things we wish we hadn't. It affects the way we feel about ourselves and the way in which we interact with others. Of course, a certain kind of stress or challenge can leave us feeling fulfilled, having achieved an objective, but too often it tends to spill over into the other, not so useful kind of stress, and we are left wondering what life is about. This is where the importance of training the mind, of maintaining contact with this underlying sense of fulfillment and happiness no matter what's happening in our lives, can make such a profound difference. This is what it means to have headspace. Relationships. Mindfulness will undoubtedly help you get some headspace and make a difference to your life. That's probably why you are reading this book in the first place. But there's another good reason for training in mindfulness. Because, whether we like it or not, we share the world in which we live with other people, and unless we want to live as a solitary yogi or hermit in the mountains, we're always going to have to interact with others. So, who benefits most from your increased sense of headspace? Is it you, or is it the people around you? It's safe to assume that if you're in a better place because you're practicing mindfulness and doing your meditation each day, then you're going to interact with others in a more positive way as well. This is perhaps the most neglected aspect of mind training. When meditation came from the East to the West, for some reason it quickly became about me, myself, and I. While this was perhaps inevitable at first, it's important that we now, as time goes by, have the intention to make it a more altruistic type of training. My guess is that you probably struggle most in life when you are focusing on your own problems, because that's what we tend to do as humans. We like to obsess, ruminate, and analyze endlessly. Okay, so we don't actually like doing it, but it can sometimes feel impossible to stop it. But what happens when you think about someone else's problems instead? The nature of the internal struggle changes, right? Sure, you might feel sad or upset when you think about their difficulties, but it feels very different from obsessing about your own problems. There's a shift in perspective. And this is such an important part of training the mind. By focusing less on your own worries and more on the potential happiness of others, you actually create more headspace for yourself. Not only that, but the mind becomes softer, more malleable, easier to work with. It tends to be quicker to settle on the object of meditation, less easily distracted by passing thoughts. It also tends to be clearer, more stable, and less reactive to volatile emotions. So, giving your practice an altruistic edge is about so much more than simply doing the right thing. It should come as no surprise that the impact this simple skill can have on your relationships with others is quite profound. In becoming more aware of everything and everyone, you inevitably become more aware of others. You start to notice how sometimes you might unintentionally, or even intentionally, push their buttons, or notice what causes them to push yours. You start to listen to what they're actually saying, rather than thinking about what you'd like them to say, or what you're going to say next. And when these things begin to happen, you'll notice that your relationships with others really start to change. But so long as we're immersed in our own thoughts the whole time, it's very difficult to truly find time for others. The 3 components of mind training. Traditionally, meditation was never practiced alone. It was always part of a broader system of mind training. More specifically, meditation was just one part of 3 key aspects. The first part of the training would be understanding how to approach the technique. This means discovering the dynamics of the mind and how it's likely to behave when you practice the technique. Only then would you be introduced to the actual meditation techniques. But there was a third aspect too. Having gained a sense of familiarity with the technique, the emphasis would be on the integration of that quality of mind into everyday life. In the rush to bring meditation to the West, 2 of these aspects have been largely neglected. And without those 2 pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, the essence of meditation is lost. it becomes something isolated from its original context, and therefore less effective. It also has considerably less impact on your everyday life. So perhaps it's no surprise that people have struggled so much with meditation over the years. For meditation to really work, to get the very best from the techniques, it's vital that all three components are present: how best to approach the techniques, how best to practice the techniques, and how best to integrate the techniques. No one aspect of this jigsaw is more or less important than the next. Imagine you're given a beautiful classic car to look after. Now you've never driven a car before, never had any lessons, and the car is so unusual, so rare, that you're not even too sure what all the different pedals, levers, and buttons do. The approach to meditation is like learning how to drive the car. You don't need to understand all the mechanics under the hood, but you need to know how to operate the various pedals, levers, and buttons. You'll also need to get used to the power of the car, your positioning on the road, and of course to the unpredictability of all the other cars around you. This is the approach. But this is no ordinary car. It's a classic car, and so it requires that the engine is turned over on a regular basis in order for it to remain healthy, and for it to work at its optimum capacity next time you want to take it for a drive. If you're not familiar with classic cars, then this might sound a little strange, but it's just what these old engines need once in a while. That's where the meditation comes in. Sitting down each day, and without actually taking the car for a ride, you sit there and allow the engine to tick over at its own comfortable pace while you listen to it chugging away, becoming more familiar with how it sounds and how it feels. This is the practice. But then what good is a car if you never take it anywhere? And it's the same with meditation. The purpose of learning meditation is not so that you can spend your life sitting on your backside with your eyes closed, but to integrate that familiarity of awareness into other areas of your life. This is the integration. This means there are two different ways of using meditation. One is the aspirin approach, as I like to call it. We go out, lead busy lives, get stressed, need something to make us feel better afterward, and so do some meditation. Feeling better, refreshed, we then go out again, lead busy lives again, get stressed again, until we once more need something to make us feel better. There's nothing wrong with this approach. In fact, you may well get considerable headspace from it, but it's limited when compared to the second approach, which works to integrate that same quality of mind into the remainder of your life. The amount of time most people are able to dedicate toward the practice of seated meditation is but a fraction of the day. The great thing about applying mindfulness to the rest of the day is that it doesn't require you to take any more time out or to change your schedule in some way. In fact, you can just keep on doing exactly what you had planned. The difference is not in the activity, but the way in which you direct your mind while doing those things. Thank you for listening. With this, we reach the end of the first part of the book. I will be continuing with the second part named The Approach. Don't forget to subscribe and click that little ring button to be notified for the second part. I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.